Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Deadhead Cannabis Show. I'm Larry Mishkin of Mishkin Law in Chicago. I'm joined today by Jim Marty of Bridge West. Jim is in Colorado. Rob Hunt of Linnae Holdings. Rob is in New York and will be speaking with us. We have a wonderful guest with us today, Jordan Wellington of the Vincente Cederberg Law Firm, who's going to talk with us quite a bit about government policy and what's going on in the marijuana world. And we're going to have an in-depth discussion of the Grateful Dead Allman Brothers Band Summer Jam. Big, huge, I don't even know how else to describe it, in Watkins-Glen in 1973 with about 600,000 people for a great day of music at Summer Jam. And we're going to dive into that. We're going to get a review from our guest today about the Billy and the Kids show and their recent performance. And that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. So we've got a great show lined up. Jim, how are you doing today?
Very good. I'm actually in Minnesota today, visiting my parent company, going over some of our books and records and how we're doing financially. So it's been a good quarter for Bridge West. A lot of work for us.
Excellent. Excellent. Rob, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Had an epic day of fishing yesterday. Caught all sorts of bluefish, and my 5-year-old son pulled in his first 15-pound blue, aided, of course, with the assistance of some other people. But check my Facebook page for visual evidence. But just still high from the experience of last night.
Wonderful. Very, very exciting stuff. That's always fun. A little father-son togetherness, whether it's on a fishing boat or a dead show or wherever we might find it. Quick news on my end, out of basically a bolt of lightning out of the sky last week on Thursday, Illinois all of a sudden announced licenses. So we got licenses awarded for cultivation, processing, and transportation. A few of my clients were lucky enough to grab some of those licenses, so we're very, very excited about that. There's a huge, gigantic, very hard to explain and even harder to understand plan for more licenses to be awarded with maybe, but maybe not more applications. The dispensary licenses haven't come yet, but we're being told it's just a matter of time, hopefully the end of this month. But after all this time, there was some movement finally, and so at least I guess Illinois deserves a little bit of credit for that in moving things forward. So very, very nice about that. Rob, would you like to introduce our guest today?
I would love to. So Jordan Wellington is our guest today, and he is a good buddy of mine that I don't see nearly as often as I'd like to, and honestly don't speak to nearly as often as I'd like to. But as far as Grateful Dead fans / cannabis policy and legislative guys that I can sit there and have conversations with on like 1,000 different levels on a ton of different topics that I care about, very few people in the world that I'd rather be speaking to than Jordan. So Jordan, welcome to the show. Love to talk to you about all the work you've done at VS Strategies. I know Jim's got some questions for you as well, kind of about background, but welcome to the Deadhead Cannabis Show, and please introduce yourself.
Thanks, guys. I'm super pumped and excited to be on the show. I think as soon as I saw that this was a thing, I sent Rob a message and was like, I have to do this. I host my own podcast called The Weed Wonks and love talking about cannabis policy with people all the time, and also love the Grateful Dead and all of their music and the stuff that's been created from them and where they came from and the live music scene here in Colorado. And I think it's awesome to have a forum where we can kind of get together and talk about this stuff, because the intersection of the cannabis industry and people who love the Grateful Dead is just one of kind of the most amazing parts of my job and getting to work in this industry, because I seem to have a very high percentage of people I have at least one band I like in common with that also work in cannabis, and it always becomes a nexus point for us to build relationships, and that's why it's fun to build this industry together, is because you get to do it with fun people.
Well, very good, Jordan. As we get into the topics for today, let's start out by giving us a little background about yourself. Where'd you go to law school? Where'd you start out your career? How did you get into cannabis? How'd you get with Vincente Cederberg?
Well, those are a bunch of different questions, so I'll try to do the moderately express version, but the fun version nonetheless. So I'm a Jersey boy, born and bred. Went to Brooklyn Law School, University of Maryland at undergrad. I guess started really going to see a lot of live music back in the day at PNC Bank Art Center and Irving Plaza and all the kind of New York scene. And then I would say in 2012, so I'd been out of law school for a few years. I was working at the Colorado State Legislature or I'm sorry, the New Jersey State Legislature as a bill drafter. My wife and I had just gotten married. I had come out to Colorado to visit my stepbrother Josh Pollock, who owns Rosenberg's Bagels and Delicatessen and many other fine restaurants here in the Denver, Colorado area. Always got to work your family plugs.
Let's just stop for a second and plug that one more time. The name of his restaurant one more time for all those?
Yeah, the name of the restaurant group is Bridge and Tunnel Restaurant Group. For those of us who know what the New York people call the New Jersey people, that's what they call us. So he owns 3 bagel places, a pizza place, an Italian deli, and an ice cream shop here, mostly in the Denver metro area, although one is now up in Boulder. And he makes the only legitimate bagels I've ever had outside of the New York area, as well as the creator, sadly not the purveyor, but the creator of what we believe to be the world's first ever marijuana-infused smoked salmon. In fact, if you Google marijuana-infused smoked salmon, my stepbrother comes up, which is one of his many great claims to fame. So he lived out here before I did, and we came to visit him, and basically my wife and I just quit our jobs in July of 2012 and ran away and moved to Colorado. Moved to Denver and started working in the Colorado House Majority Office, basically as a glorified intern that session. Was getting paid $10 an hour. Regardless of whatever labor laws existed, there was no overtime pay, but there was a lot of hours, and I just showed up to work one day, and the legislative director basically just erased everything I was working on and drew a big pot leaf under my name on the whiteboard where he maintained everyone's jobs and said, "You're now in charge of implementing marijuana legalization for the state of Colorado on behalf of the House Majority Office. Go meet then Majority Leader Representative Dan Pabone, who's another great attorney that's in this industry. You're going to be helping him," and I helped carry the bills that implemented marijuana legalization through the Colorado House, shepherd them through the Senate, then got hired by the Marijuana Enforcement Division and ran policy implementation for the Marijuana Enforcement Division with some amazing people like Louis Koski and Ron Camerzel over there. I loved working at the MED. I loved working at the legislature, but I'm a Jewish boy from New Jersey, a deadhead through and through, and eventually there were a lot of people with guns and badges at the MED, which I really liked, but was not the place for me. And Christian Cedarberg, who's a great friend of a lot of the folks on this show, have become really close during the implementation of legalization because basically they ran the campaign and his goal was to not screw this up for everyone else. And I was told by my brothers and family and friends living back in New Jersey, you better not screw this up for everyone else. And so we hit it off right away. And so when it was time to leave the state and leave public service, I just called up Christian and was like, I want to come work at VS and I want to go, legalize cannabis and end the drug war and help build an industry with you guys. And that was in 2014, and through thick and thin and good and bad and all the journeys that we've been on, we're all still kind of trying to make the world a better place together. It's a pretty awesome experience, I would say.
So, Jordan, you asked me before if you could swear in the show. My answer to you is, for what you just described and what you've done the last 7 or 8 years, is fuck yeah. And thank you for all the work you've put in for cannabis in general and for all of us out there that have been fighting this fight. Having a person like you step in and go from the New Jersey State House to jumping into VS Strategies is something I think all of us owe you a debt of gratitude for, in just making our fight that much easier with competent people on our side.
Thanks, man. I mean, I guess I just feel like I'm this lucky fucking hippie kid from New Jersey who gets to do the most fun thing in the world and work with the most fun people and, really get to be passionate about building our industry, but really doing something that creates massive social change at the same time and makes the world a better place for our kids.
Well, I would agree with that, Jordan. It sounds like you might be 1 or 2 years younger than I am. I'm not sure. But when I started off, practicing law in 1987, legalized marijuana was truly a pipe dream. And that's about the only time we ever thought of it. And so, all of a sudden, here I am much later in my career and the opportunity is here. But I will say, just like you, that it's been a wonderful experience and an opportunity to really get involved and work with this industry that I've been a fan of and participant in for such a long period of time, and to finally see it come above ground and in a way, and to know that we get to help shape it and we get to work with it. And I was cutting my chops in this industry with Bob Hoban and his group for quite some time. Bob has now gone off in another direction and taken the Hoban Law Group one way, and wishing him the best of luck. And I continue my fight for the good guys in Illinois, and try to keep moving things forward. And now that we got some licenses announced, that's all good too. But it is a wonderful thing, and I know Vincente Cederberg has been at the center of a lot of the fights that have taken place. Bob Hoban, I know, worked with you guys on some of them, and a lot of others. You've gone into states and really helped establish those policies. And as Rob says, that's the dirty work that nobody sees. Most of the people out there just say, "Oh wow, I can go buy marijuana in my state. Isn't that great?" And they run off and do it without really thinking about what everybody had to do to put it in there. Tell us, what are the big issues going on right now that you're working with?
I think it runs the gamut. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in Colorado that I'd love to talk about, because that's, sometimes the future for the rest of the country. Really, really excited about what's going on in New Mexico right now, our neighbor to the south. One of the few states that have legalized and put forward a market recently without a very restrictive cap system. So I think that's really an exciting thing to see and an exciting development from a market perspective. Obviously, I think everyone's keeping their eyes on Mississippi, and is anything actually going to happen down there is something interesting and something probably worth talking about. And then, what is the impact of the East Coast domino? And that's before you even get to the federal level, which I think you guys talked a lot about last time, so maybe we can skip. But I'd like to talk about my favorite thing first to talk about, which is cannabis hospitality and cannabis delivery in Colorado these days. And the reason that is because, I was having a great conversation with some folks that work in the alcohol industry yesterday at the federal level. And, I likened, even in a state like Colorado, I likened legalization to alcohol without bars or restaurants or concert venues or comedy clubs. Like, cannabis legalization basically means you don't go to jail for possessing it. And there are the equivalent of liquor stores where you can buy it and you can use it at your house. And I don't live my life that way. And most of my friends don't live our lives that way. We live our lives as social creatures out in the community. I get most of my stuff delivered. The cannabis store is one of the few stores that I go to. It's kind of like the grocery store. You actually kind of like going to it, but I think we should have the option to have it delivered if it's a legal product. And that's really a consumer choice issue. And then I think, just like alcohol consumers, we should be able to go out with our friends and go socialize at restaurants and bars and venues that cater to our community. Maybe one day they'll let us do both at the same place. I've got reams and reams of experience and single study data that shows it can be done safely. But I think that's really the next phase of the world, right? Is not, you're not a criminal for using cannabis, but in fact, two grown adults can go out and have a nice dinner together and consume cannabis, right? Like, how many cannabis industry events have you been at where they serve alcohol and you're like, where can I go smoke a joint? And they're like, oh no, you can't do that here. And I'm like, usually like, all right, cool. Like, I'm going right outside and doing it anyway. But to me, that's the thing we need to start talking about is equal treatment under the law and what that means.
As a point of clarification, Dan Humiston never let me smoke weed in his events. So, Dan, just listen to what Jordan's saying. Next time you throw an event, make a make a small room where we can all sit there and pack bowls.
Although, for the record, I want to say I noticed that never stopped our good friend Mr. Marty, so I'm just throwing that out there as well.
Yeah. Well, we got here through civil disobedience, right? Like,
Yeah, there's usually quite the crowd outside a cannabis event smoking.
Yeah, and it's not the event producers that are making these decisions. It's the states and local governments that have not created a regulatory system around social consumption. And even folks who, we dealing with these folks in Colorado that are like, we support legalization, but we oppose hospitality. And it's like, well, that's nice. I appreciate that you don't think I should be put in a cage, but actually, my wife and I deserve the same rights that you and your husband have. We just prefer cannabis instead of alcohol.
Well, Jordan, the way I refer to it sometimes, like when I'm talking or giving presentations, is, I say to people, marijuana is not legal, right? You can't go buy it on a street corner. You can't smoke a joint on the street. It's not legal. It's still illegal, with a few exceptions that have now been written into the law by way of these adult use laws. So what can we do under adult use law? You can go to a specific place, buy it from a specific person for cash, bring it home in a plain brown bag and not open it till you get home. But when you get home, go downstairs in your basement to smoke it so nobody on the street can see you. And I said, I'm not quite sure how that's any different from my high school experience, but that's basically, you're right, the system that we have, and there's no reason if people can sell it and if the government can make tax revenue off of it, why we shouldn't be allowed to have the same rights that other businesses have and other businesses that, especially in the liquor industry. And
yes, as we spoke a week or two ago, those very points were made by no less than Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas.
Well, right, he was that was interesting too. What was your take on Thomas's written opinion, Jordan?
I don't know. I mean, okay, yeah, thanks. We've all been thinking the same thing. Like, appreciate you saying it. Listen, everyone think we can talk about this academically all we want. It's pretty straightforward. Up until the point where the political incentives are such that people actually want to legalize cannabis at the federal level, it's not going to change. Like, human beings respond to incentives. We're all incentive computers that process the incentives around us. Politicians are no different. Right now, the incentives are to focus on other things and have other priorities. And until those incentives change, we're still going to be there. And everyone can look at it and be like, this makes no sense. It's like, well, for sure, like the Supreme Court, you could agree or disagree with Clarence Thomas on whatever you want, but he's no dummy. And anybody can look at this and be like, well, this makes no sense. But it's not, this is politics. It's not logic or reason. It's ephemeral and it's human beings. And so it's going to take some time. It's cool when everyone else looks at it and they're like, this doesn't make any sense. But it's like, it's almost like validation of what we live with every day in this industry of this, like, this makes no sense. So it's cool to see, but, we're making progress and it's slow and steady. And, that's what all of this stuff has been. This hasn't been one big, massive, sweeping change. It's incrementalism. It's baby steps, one after another. The Overton window changes, and you can get more done. We never would have been able to have, thoughtful discussions about social equity programs if Colorado hadn't generally legalized. We wouldn't be talking about hospitality if there wasn't decriminalization. We wouldn't be talking about psychedelic reform if there probably wasn't cannabis reform. Like, it's just one thing after another. And Colorado, 2 years ago in 2019, we had this unbelievable legislative session. Jared Polis's first in office, where we passed a whole bunch of landmark legislation about medical access, as well as delivery and hospitality and some financing reforms. And those reforms are now working their way through the local government. Kudos to Denver that actually opted in to cannabis hospitality and will allow licensing of businesses for on-site legal consumption of cannabis. They're allowed to be co-located with restaurants, so you can actually have a cannabis restaurant. We're working on getting that done up in Boulder. Aurora has already put regulations out for it, and is considering it. And, I hope that at least a few years from now, especially as the pandemic, which has just ravaged the hospitality industry pretty hard over the last several years, kind of comes to an end, that we'll be able to go out to dinner. You guys will come to Denver for some event, one reason or another. And instead of going out to a restaurant that serves alcohol, we can go out to a restaurant that is designed to cater to our community. It's kind of become my wife and I's dream at this point. Like, could we just go out to a restaurant that's for us as opposed to it's not that I never drink alcohol. It's nothing against it. It's just I'd rather consume cannabis, and it's kind of weird that there's no restaurants that cater to us.
Jordan, are these restaurants you're talking about going to make space available for people who want to consume the cannabis they bring with them, or will they also be able to make cannabis-infused food items?
So those are a bunch of different interesting questions. So the law allows for 3 different kinds of businesses: a bring-your-own cannabis model, an on-site service, more like a bar or a restaurant that would bring you a glass of wine that they have there, as well as mobile hospitality for tour buses and things like that. There isn't an events license, which is kind of tricky, but there's some solutions that we've been able to come up with that aren't great, but eventually we might get there. So the law allows for both. What it doesn't allow for is on-site infusion. So you can buy flour, you can buy concentrates, you can buy edibles, and you can serve those edibles. And there was some significant concern around testing and whether those products could be tested. And so I had a Very long conversation with some of the folks at our regulatory agency. Colorado, I think, has hands down the best regulators in the country. Maybe I'm biased. I used to work there, and I think they're wonderful. But we had some really thoughtful conversations, and they're like, "How is this going to work?" And I was basically like, "I don't know. They're chefs. Like, it's literally like all day long. They measure ingredients. They put them in there. That's how they make each dish taste the same. Like, that's what they do." And they were like, "Jordan, can we just come back and revisit this in a few years after the program gets going?" And I was like, all right, that's reasonable. Like, that makes sense. I was a little disappointed having a brother that we mentioned that's in the hospitality industry here in Colorado that has done some really cool things around cannabis. Passover has really never been the same at our family ever since that started coming around. And I think there would have been some cool stuff with chefs in town and special events. But, you know, I get the regulator's perspective too, right? Like, we're so concerned about testing that, you know, if you're not going to test edibles, it probably makes sense that you kind of, we got to come up with a solve here for this, and we'll get there.
As long as we're throwing out Jewish holidays, Jordan, for us it's Rosh Hashanah and the infused honey, which always makes for a very, very happy New Year. So
Absolutely.
First time I found that in Colorado when I was out there for a Hoban retreat and brought it back home, and everybody loved it so much that the next year I was out there, I had orders to literally bring back 3 or 4 or 5 bottles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just amazing how everybody just becomes a lot more relaxed and likes to sit there and sing at the table. And it was greeted with great appreciation. So I enjoyed being able to infuse the party, if you will.
Absolutely.
So we've been talking quite a bit about Denver and Colorado, but Jordan, you're doing some work down in New Mexico. What's going on down there?
Yeah, I mean, our firm, we're the political and government affairs arm of the Vicente Cedarberg law firm. The firm is called VS Strategies. So we represent a bunch of clients here in Colorado, work with ancillary services really all over the country doing different kinds of lobbying, and then dive super deep into different markets where we have clients that are really engaged, whether it be Pennsylvania or Mississippi, and New Mexico is one of those. I love New Mexico because it's right down south. It's our neighbor down there, and they've struggled for a few years to kind of get from a very small medical market to an actual adult use market. They passed what I think is an awesome piece of legislation down there to implement, the kind of neck and neck with New York. In some ways, New York, you can't hate on New York. You can smoke a cigarette. You can smoke weed anywhere. You can smoke a cigarette. So that was the first time we've ever seen that, and that's pretty cool. But New Mexico, they're just going to go through a much more normal licensing process. There's going to be your standard license types, as well as the possibility for other different kinds of, cannabis licenses and different kind of expansion of the market. But there's no state cap. So it's not Illinois. It's not New York, New Jersey, some of these other states where the state's going to tell you how many businesses you're going to run. The states, there's going to be some level of production management, but it's not, we're going to give out, this number of cultivation licenses for this total number of square feet. And, I just don't get it. I understand the need, want to be thoughtful and patient and not overdo things, but it's the only market in the country that I'm aware of, other than maybe some random states with weird liquor laws like Pennsylvania or some gaming, where the state's going to determine the number of businesses that should exist. And they're usually not very good at it, right? I mean, that's kind of been the MO in the history. And in my home state of New Jersey, they've really struggled to get more production going. And I have friends from back home that qualify for medical that don't even get a card and don't even try cannabis or just go to the illicit market. And New Mexico has taken a different pathway. And it's a southwestern state, and it's getting opened up into an open market. It's right next to Texas. It's not that far from Austin. Texas is a big state. We talk about federal things moving forward. New Mexico, Colorado influences New Mexico. New Mexico influences Texas. Texas influences the federal government. You all of a sudden you're in a pretty interesting place from a reform perspective. So, and that doesn't even get into, New Mexico has amazing tourism and everything else. So I think the market possibilities there are super, super dynamic. And the fact that the state's not just going to dictate everything, I think gives us a real opportunity to see what happens when the state's not saying, okay, there's going to be 100 stores in the entire state. Because that's not good for consumers. It's not good for patients.
Right. Yep. We have some clients down in New Mexico as well, applicants, and I think licenses might start getting issued as early as September of this year.
Yeah. We have a client that's working on properties now. There's the local governments are going through their implementation process, which is happening very, very quickly. The state has issued their producer regs. Maybe worth noting, they had canopy limits set in their initial set of regs, and they doubled them in round 2. So, I think that's probably largely good news for both producers as well as consumers. That there's going to be a little bit more slack in the market when it opens up, and I think within the next year, you're going to start to see a pretty vibrant market take off down in New Mexico, and that'll be really exciting.
Yes, I certainly agree. And we've hit cannabis policy pretty good. Do we want to shift gears to music, or are there any other cannabis topics you want to touch on before we do?
Well, actually, before we talk Watkins-Glen, and we have Jordan, I want to hear about this Billy and the Kids show that he was telling us about, and Watkins-Glen we'll get to, but Billy and the Kids just happened when, Jordan?
So last week, so it's been pretty exciting. Live music has come back in Colorado. Actually, I maybe not the most out of everyone I know, but I have managed to get to 7 shows at Red Rocks already this summer. So yeah, I got to see a couple PodCONX shows. Got to see Dark Star, Bobby, a Leftover Salmon show with a bunch of stuff. And then the highlight of my music in years has been this Billy and the Kids came. They did those shows out in Hawaii, where it was, Billy and the Kids is a band he's had for a few years with Tom Hamilton and Aaron Manger and Reed Mathis, and they're just, they play that kind of electric, fast-paced fire Grateful Dead that you just don't get every time these days, when it gets a little slow and then real slow sometimes. And
hey, Jordan, did Dominic Lally play with him this time? Because I know Dom sits in sometimes when they're in Denver.
No. So he's got the core band plus a saxophone player named James Casey, and the incomparable Billy Strings, who is a big time favorite in the Wellington household. And then on Monday, so it was a Monday Tuesday show, which is just crazy and brutal, and I'm old, is largely part of the review, I guess. Monday, Tuesday shows are rough.
You're not allowed to say that with this group. I'm the youngest of this group.
I think I might be a little bit younger than you, Rob. So I can't even imagine.
You are. That's the point, Jordan. You're not allowed to call yourself old in this group.
And just so you guys know, even though this show is going to be broadcast on Monday, the 26th, we're taping it the week before, and tomorrow on Thursday, I'm departing for my son's bachelor party up in Wisconsin. So I think they're bringing me along to laugh at me a little bit, but we'll see. But yeah, you feel old when it's like your kid's having a bachelor party. But I will tell you that I strongly believe that it's a bonds made between marijuana and Grateful Dead, or in this case more fish, that have generated this kind of connection where I'm invited along to something where my dad might not have been invited when that was me 30 years ago. So at any rate, yes, that's not to reveal my age too much, but those are the issues I'm dealing with.
Yeah. So yeah, he had on the first night he had Jeff Franca and Jason Hahn from String Cheese come out to do a drums before the encore, and then the second night just Franca came out for drums for the to start the encore, but he also had Paul Hoffman from Green Sky Bluegrass come out. So the music was absolutely fantastic. Tons of highlights. Reed Mathis singing Brown Eyed Women was particularly fire. You don't expect a positively 4th Street very much at all, but pretty amazing on that one. The So Many Roads that Billy Strings sang the first night was just awesome, and there was this bird song, Other One Sandwich, that just was you just don't get. When you go see Dead & Company, we don't need to rehash the old discussion about why it's slow, but it is, and we went to go see Bobby and the Wolf Brothers, and it was super tasty and super choice and super slow, which was fun, and we loved it. We had a great time. We had a really good crew out for that one. But the second night of Billy and the Kids, I think we had about 30 people with us. Huge VS and cannabis contingent from folks from all over the industry. Came out. We had a really, really good group, which is always fun when you can kind of occupy 3 or 4 levels of rows at Red Rocks at a GA show. But I also got to take the superhero in my life, my son Robbie, who is a big music fan. He is turning 5 for his 5th birthday in August. He's done 2 Red Rocks shows already this summer. He did the Leftover show and Billy and the Kids. And I was like, it's late, and during the week, I'm like, I don't know if you can go, and his response was, I'm going. I want to go see Billy Strings, Daddy. And like, how do you argue with that? You're just like, all right.
So Jordan,
Yeah.
Jordan, does this mean your 5-year-old is walking around your house going festival?
We just got this like Derek and the Dominoes, it's the Tedeschi Trucks Band with Trey did that Layla. They just put it out on vinyl, and I was listening to it, and Robbie was in his room playing Legos, singing "Why Does Love Have to Be So Sad" over and over again, and I was just like, Mike, you are my fucking superhero, dude. So. Yeah, we're taking him to Dillon this weekend for a bluegrass festival that they're doing up there, and he just did amazing. He crushed it. He was there till like 10:15 at night, and said, "Daddy, I'm tired. I want to go home." I'm like, "That's okay. We can go home whenever you want." He's like, "Daddy, I really want to stay at Red Rocks. This is so awesome." I'm like, "I know how you feel." I'm like, "Why don't you stay till the end of this song?" And then my wife.
So Jordan.
Yeah.
My 5-year-old now knows the difference between tweezer and tweezer reprise, which makes me very, very happy.
Yeah.
And he'll be like, no, that's not tweezer. That's tweezer reprise.
Yeah.
And he knows all the words to Contact. He knows all the words to, not all the words, but he's learning a lot of the words to Haley's Comet, which, as you know, are super difficult lyrics. So it's he's got it going. I've got both my children working on the harmony of the end of Bouncing Around the Room.
I started taking our sons to Red Rocks when they were 5, 6 years old. Our son Jack, who's now 23, his first show was String Cheese and the Allman Brothers at Red Rocks. And he was at Billy and the Kids. I did not go. It was a school night for me. I had to keep working. But anyway, yeah, it was a great show. I think they introduced a new song because I saw some of the video of it later. It's called Thunder, I believe, and it's a new Robert Hunter song that was never released.
Yeah, with Billy Strings, who put the music to it. They played it the first night and like a little tease of it the second night, and that one was really cool. I mean, it's just kind of amazing that you could. I mean, every one of us, it becomes a generational thing, and taking my kid to see this stuff has been great. It's been a lot of Tom Petty in my house. Actually, his 5th birthday is he's requesting a dinosaur construction donut Tom Petty themed birthday party, and is demanding that we get a Tom Petty cover band. I can't figure out if he wants to like front the Tom Petty cover band or actually listen to them play, but it's been a lot of wildflowers and walls in our house, so he's got exceptional taste. And Jim, I think that's super cool. We didn't even talk about this before, but talk about kismet. Robbie was 2, and his first ever Red Rocks show was also String Cheese, but had the immortal Del McCoury as the opener. So I was like super, super proud. I was like, yeah, then he talks to some lady at the show, like at the Leftover show when we took him, and she's like, "Oh, you're so young. Have you ever been to Red Rocks before?" And he's like, "Pshaw, I used to come here all the time before the sickies."
Yeah. Our older son, Matt, who's 33, he lost his first tooth at a Grateful Dead concert in the Silver Bowl in Las Vegas in 1992. And we count his first show as Grateful Dead Telluride 87 in vitro. My wife was pregnant at the time with our firstborn. So yeah, we started early with them. But yeah, great video, great shows. The sound this year at Red Rocks is phenomenal. I also was at Bob Weir and the Wolf Brothers and Widespread Panic and Michael Friante. And that new roof and the speakers that they're hanging there all summer, they don't move them. Just incredible sound at Red Rocks this year.
Yeah, the new roof is fantastic. The new lighting system that they've installed, even the house lights, are completely out of control. And the shows have been great, and it's been super fun to take the kid, and I mean, what can be better than kind of being able to enjoy this stuff, at Red Rocks. I don't know. The first time I went there, I saw Neil Young, and I was like, oh shit, like this is a new thing I need to do with my time. I can't leave Denver as long as this is a thing, because there's just nothing else like being there. It's cosmic in a way, and we got really good weather those first couple of nights with Billy, and they opened with China Cat on the first show, and they played I Know You Rider to close the second encore. After got a drums Terrapin Rider encore, which is I think probably pretty rare in the list of things you can get, and so it was a pretty amazing couple of nights.
It's been a great year in Colorado. We really are opening up here. I travel some, and I'm up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and they are a long way from opening up here.
Yeah, it's been a bit overwhelming with the music that's been coming around, but I mean we're getting all the Grateful Dead choices. We got Bobby coming, we got Billy coming, we got Phil coming, we got Dead and Company coming. So I'm going to try to take my kid to as much as I can handle putting him on my shoulders for, and trying to get him to do that stuff, because the younger you start them on music, regardless of what they end up loving, I think the better and the real relationship that they'll have with it.
Well, Jordan, let me tell you this. I started my kids a little bit later, only because I was selfish and I didn't want to go to the show and have to deal with my kids. I just,
oh my God.
I love my kids, and but at some point along the way, I need to be able to just go and enjoy. So, my kids went through music the way most kids did. We had the big argument about it on the car rides, where we're going to listen to Scarlet Fire, from Hartford in 1983, Dick's Picks #6. Yet again, Dad, or can we please listen to The Fray? So, my wife playing Peacemaker, we wound up listening to The Fray as much as we wound up listening to The Dead. But now here they are many years later, and all three of my boys, ranging in age from 30 to 19, are all jam band fans. They love Phish. They like The Dead. They would go to see any of it. So I think, part of it's just DNA, although I always joked that there wasn't a single album in my father's record collection that I had any interest in. And every time I go back to St. Louis, I check just to see, and I'm always like, nope, nothing there. And my kids are like coming through and picking my albums clean. So it's a nice feeling.
Well, while we're talking about all the great music coming through Colorado, let's not forget to mention we got 3 Phish shows on Labor Day weekend.
Yes, you do. But I'll be seeing Phish in Indy very shortly, August 7th and 8th. So 6th and 7th, 7th and 8th, whatever that Saturday and Sunday is.
And then Larry, you and Jordan and Jim are all going to come down and visit me in San Diego, I'm sure, to see Phish as well. So let's just put it on the record that everyone's expected to be down at that show. And Jim, just to put it on the record as well, I think I've lost a lot of things for the first time at Grateful Dead shows. So it's great that it was a tooth for your child, but I can put the blank space in there and add the Mad Libs, and you could add one of like 50 different words for what it is that I lost for the first time at a Grateful Dead show.
Well, that's a funny story because, it was during Box of Rain, and he immediately dropped and lost his tooth there in the stands there at the Silver Bowl. And we're looking for it, because you know how exciting it is to lose your first tooth and put it under your pillow and get a few coins or a dollar.
Or chips.
Yeah.
Bag of weed.
One of the ladies who was with us, she bends down and she picks up a little kernel of corn from popcorn. She goes, "Oh, here's your tooth." And he took it like it was really his tooth, and I put it under his pillow that night. And the tooth fairy came. I put it under his pillow, and I said goodnight, and I headed out at midnight and came back when the sun was coming up.
And would she give him 2 tabs?
Exactly, the perfect gift. Well, let's take a moment here and transition over, because we've got some really great Grateful Dead stuff to talk about today. And it's the Summer Jam that the Dead played at Watkins-Glen on July 28th, 1973, on a bill where they opened. They were the opening act, and then followed by the band with the Allman Brothers closing things out later in the evening. There was rain during the day. There was a lot of mud. There was 600,000 people, and it was really a lot of fun. There's great write-ups on it. The music is fantastic, although some people say it may not have been the Dead's best show, but it was probably the largest crowd they ever played in front of. Rob, thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start off with saying, if you thought the Tinley Park 1990 traffic was bad, by all accounts, the traffic getting into that place is absolute insanity. And I'll also say, I've never been in a crowd of 600,000 people. The biggest show I ever saw the Dead play was maybe Buffalo, which was, I think, held 105,000 at Rich Stadium. And that felt so claustrophobically huge. I mean, look, I look for access at shows as far as like backstage or laminates, not because like I want to be close to the artist. I just don't want to be out in the crowd a lot of the time, and I just want to be someplace with like a clean bathroom and like access to free drinks. 600,000 people would scare the hell out of me as far as being in a crowd that size. And I look at like even like some of the other like English Town or some of the other things, other spots that were like these massive like crowds. Watkins-Glen, you see the pictures of that thing. It is absolute insanity that someone thought that was a good idea.
Well, you're right, but the set list, from this show is just absolutely amazing, and what's really great is at the very end there was
It's a Sing Me Back Home. It's a Sing Me Back Home closer.
It's a Sing Me Back Home closer, exactly right. But the encore is what excites me, because you had a Nod Fade Mountain Jam and Johnny Be Good with all 3 bands on stage. and they were all out there jamming away and contributing, and it's really exciting stuff and really a lot of fun to listen to. And I would recommend it to anybody, as with just about any of the stuff we listen to on this, talk about on this show. However,
I think that was the last time they played with the Allman Brothers before Greg Allman was notoriously accused of being a narc, and everyone's like, F that guy. We're no longer, at least in the Grateful Dead organization, and like we're all set with the Allman Brothers because we can't trust that what our lifestyle is going to match up with theirs. And I think that was the last time they really hung out together, despite the fact that there's massive mutual respect as musicians, and obviously there's lots of Allman Brothers overlap now with the Dead and Company people, in later stages. But I think Greg was given a pretty bad rap right around that time.
Well, I am old enough to have been there, but I was not there. A lot of my friends headed out because I was growing up in Massachusetts at the time. So a bunch of my friends went out there, and yeah, they had stories about the crowd and the mud. But one of the big takeaways from that show, I believe the set list warm-up turned into a huge jam with the Grateful Dead and the Allman Brothers on a Friday night before the two regular shows.
Exactly right. The big surprise and secret, or not such well-kept secret, about Watkins-Glen is that the Dead arrived the day before, and they started doing a sound check, and the crowd gathered, and it did turn into, in essence, a mini show that was very well received, and in some respects, people thought they played better that day than they did the next day. It wasn't a particularly long set, 2 sets of music, but it was well played. But really, I think the takeaway from that's my favorite part of it, is the jam that they play leading into the Wharf-Rat. It turns out to be about a 19 or 20-minute jam. I first heard it years ago when the So Many Roads box set came out, and it's included on one of the discs in the So Many Roads set. And just listened to it and was so inspired by it that I had to go out and get the whole story on this sound check and what it was all about. But Dan, I think we have queued up for you a clip from that sound check if you want to go ahead and spin that for us for a minute here. This is from the sound check jam of the Grateful Dead sound check on July 27th, 1973, the day before the summer jam. Go ahead, Dan. Yeah, this is 1973. They're at their peak, right, Rob? This is like as good as it gets if you're a Grateful Dead fan.
As we've all talked about, I love 73. I love the weather reports. I love the singing back homes. I loved all the stuff that happened there. I love the fact that the China Rider transition jams were not the same transition jam that you got post 73. I love the Wave That Flag.
They love each other.
Blues. Yeah, there's so many highlights that came out of that year that are so much fun to listen to. But the Watkins-Glen, I mean, for all the times that the Dead always said that they were never at their peak during sort of like the biggest nights, I totally disagree with that statement. I think there's a lot of the nights that were supposed to be huge nights and they actually were on, and I think maybe they're overcritical of themselves. But I think Watkins-Glen, I've always loved that show. I've always loved the set list and the performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one's just super, super fun to listen to. I've queued it up many times in my life, and the idea that there's 600,000 people is by far the largest. I mean, 10 times the size of the largest concert I've ever been to. Like, I think about like the Field at Bonnaroo or something like that, back in the day before it stopped becoming jam band heavy and we would actually go, like, and that like what a crowd of 75,000 people or 60,000 people look like. To think about putting that at 10x, I think that stuff like that just used to happen, and now I think Robbie put it. People might think better of it, especially with this group. But I mean, you basically have probably about 3 of my top 5 are just my top 3 favorite bands of all time playing on one bill. Like, how can you beat that? All corners of improvisational rock and roll, from Southern to whatever the hell you want to classify the Dead, and then the band are the opposite. The band are like the pure, the tight vocals, the harmonies, everything that was like the other side of rock and roll music. The band were, I don't know, the embodiment of it, the perfection of it. I mean, how could you do better than Ronnie Hawkins and then Bob Dylan and then On Your Own and the stuff they recorded on their own. And so to think that like you're on this bill and the Dead aren't the headliners, but it would be hard to argue that, you know, you could have any one of them, and it would be hard to argue that no, they absolutely should be. And to put that together and to see it that way, it is unbelievable. And the fact that they could drag all those guys out there, you know, that stuff, it felt like that stuff happened like a long time back in the day, and then it didn't, right? I mean, and then it started up again, especially like with Levon and the Barn. And I was looking at pictures a couple of weeks ago from back in the day, and my kid was asking about them, and I'm like, that is Levon Helm playing with Bob Weir, because they did that at, you know, the Gathering of the Vibes in like 2008 or something like that. And you're just sitting there and it's like Taj Mahal, Bob Weir, and Levon Helm are on stage next to each other. And it's, you know, that stuff is crazy. And then, you know, the Allman Brothers and the Dead stuff, really, I mean, it was really like Warren Haynes, right? Even before O'Teal. And I remember, you know, when I first started really, really heavily getting into the Dead, not just like high school getting into the Dead, but college getting into the Dead, was when, you know, Phil was playing with Warren, and we went to these shows down south, and it was like a double bill between the Allman Brothers Band and the quintet, and the back and forth improvisation between those shows is maybe like one of the few things. Like there's, you know, this mountain jam that's both bands, right? I mean, when was the last time that happened?
Watkins-Glen.
Watkins-Glen, and you've got Jimmy Herring, Derek Trucks, and Warren Haynes on stage with each other, with O'Teal and Phil on bass at the same. I mean, it was just ridiculous. So they're like,
those may be the three greatest rock guitarists alive today, all playing, you know, at one time together. And I suppose you could debate throwing Trey in there or something. I don't know, but yeah, those guys are amazing. Those guys are absolutely amazing. So Jordan, I have to ask you now, and I'm sorry, but I'm curious, and you're just at that age where, you know, based on what you just said about high school, did you ever see the Grateful Dead with Jerry Garcia live?
No, I was 15 when he died. I had no clue. I was just starting to get into music. I just started going to my first few concerts, and you know, you gotta learn the basics before you start taking physics and shit like that. And I was listening to Allman Brothers. You know, it was like the Allman Brothers, and then someone was like, "Oh, if you like the Allman Brothers, you should listen to the Dead." And I was like, you know, I think for most people, it's also like the first time you hear it, it takes some time to even really get into it. So I feel like I was just too young. And my first Dead related show was, I think, like the 97 or 98 Further tour. I think it was maybe 97. I was a senior in high school, and went with one of my buddies. But I think I was like freshman turning sophomore. I remember where I was. Oddly enough, I was at the JCC in Bergen County, pour one out to the old stomping grounds, and someone was like, Jerry Garcia just died, and I was like, oh, I don't really know what that means, but that sounds important. And a few years later, it was like, oh, I now really understand what that means. So, you know,
but that's okay, because you're the classic example of, you know, the person who was born to be a Deadhead. You just were born a little bit too late, but you've obviously had no trouble developing into one, and you know, going in the direction that any one of us went when we were your age. We just had the benefit of, you know, the fact that Jerry was still around.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it's going to be the most timeless thing. I mean, and it's going to exist in perpetuity. The Grateful Dead is unique in the sense that it is an amalgamation of every form of American music that has come before it and since, right? I mean, you know, and there is no band that you go see country and blues and rock and roll and jazz, and sometimes it's all in one song, and then sometimes it's a folk song, and then it's, you know, like a New Orleans song, and then, you know, you can't. And then they start, you know, Mickey starts hitting the beam, and you're like, okay, well, this is basically electronic music. Like, I don't, you know, so there's just nothing else like it, and it's been pretty cool to be able to see everything. There's like that meme out there that the Earth is 5 billion years old, and you got to live at the same time as Jerry Garcia. So what are you complaining about? Like, like out of all of the random things that have occurred, I got to experience this when it existed, and even though I didn't get to see him, there's still plenty of that stuff out there, and you know, the community and the energy that exists when people get together and play that music is, you know, that was the biggest lesson of the pandemic, music wise. Is the thing that I miss is the people, not the music, because you can watch all the live streams and the concerts all you want, but it doesn't feel the same, and it's indescribable. But you put, you know, 10,000 people at Red Rocks all loving the same thing, and there's just this energy that exists, and I fully admit that I'm completely and utterly addicted to that energy, and that was
sure, we all are. It's wonderful.
18 months of withdrawal.
Yeah, I mean, the Grateful Dead are an industry. There's not a town in America that doesn't have one, two, or three Grateful Dead tribute bands. I mean, it's putting a lot of musicians to work all across the world, really.
And what I love how mainstream it's gone, right? Seems like every major league team now has a Grateful Dead night where they bring in a Grateful Dead cover band and they give out their team's cap with a Steal Your Face with their team's logo in it. And in St. Louis, it's become a big thing, and I just love that because the Dead blew off St. Louis for the entire 20 years practically that I was seeing the Dead until the very end. But the Cardinals.
You want to know why, Larry?
Why?
Because that town's fucking scary, and every time they played there, people got popped. All right, so let's just call it out for what it is. No one wanted to go to St. Louis. It was like terrifying.
Yeah, I don't know that it was that bad. I just think that they would like to play at the Fox Theater, and the town didn't want to have anything to do with them for a while.
They did a lot of shows. They did a lot of shows at the Fox Theater.
They did back in the day.
They did. But in the later years, they avoided it like the plague because it's notoriously the reputation of the state and of the police was let's stay away from that town. I can't tell you how many people I know that boycotted the 1995 St. Louis shows. Now it's the only shows they skipped on summer tour. They're like, nah, I'm all good on St. Louis.
It's a tough place.
I think it's so interesting, right? You go to these shows even today, though, where the security and the cops are like crazy and it's super intense and they're yelling at people and busting people. And it's like, this isn't new, guys. It's been going on for like 70 fucking years now, like live hippie music and fucking concerts and rock and roll. Like, if you don't want us to come to your town, then don't invite us. But like, we're coming, and if you invite us, this is who we are. Like, this is how we're coming. And it's, it seems silly. It's like, you guys, like, you're creating a problem for yourself. Just don't invite the band.
They'd enjoy the night off, right? It's such a peaceful crowd that for the most part is going to behave itself. There's always one or two characters that have to be brought under control, but I mean, I've been to heavy metal concerts before where you're looking around, you figure a fight could break out any second in about 12 different places. And, if you're security working one of those things with big biker guys in leather chains drinking lots of beer, I have to imagine that's not such a fun night for you.
But you know what the difference is? The difference for law enforcement is that those guys were drinkers and our guys were users of cannabis and users of other drugs, right? And so for them, they're like, okay, this is an easy layup. We're not going to get huge resistance. We're not going to have to fight these people. And we're going to be able to bust these guys, without any fear of reprisal from the people we're popping for the most part. And that was the entire appeal. Like, you got your busting, you got your arrest in, and it was on a relatively peaceful group of people. That the only thing they were doing differently is that they were non-violently using drugs instead of being jackasses that were hammered.
Right. That's true. It's a very good point.
As we come towards the end of our show today, I wanted to mention that seeing the Billy and the Kids on video, I thought Billy Kreutzmann looked great. He's mid-70s. He's playing really well. He looks really good.
He's a handsome man.
He's let it be known that he does low-dose psychedelics every day.
Don't you?
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't do low-dose psychedelics every day? I mean, Jordan does. Everyone knows that.
Come on, Jim.
No comment on my drug use. Well, maybe some comments sometimes, but not at the moment. But he was fantastic. I mean, it was, you kind of don't. I mean, drumming is not. It ain't sitting up there and strumming a guitar sitting down. He was cooking, and they were not slow.
That's my point, right? Him, the drummer of all people, he's the guy keeping the beat going. I love that.
Crushing it. I mean, it was fast. It was heavy. They did a good amount of slow songs. The slow songs were supposed to be slow songs, like So Many Roads and Broke Down. And
one question: J-Rad versus Billy and the Kids for energy. Who would you rather see?
For who would I rather see? I don't know. That's a tough question, right? Like, it's a really spicy question. I don't know. I mean, it's...
Let me ask you this, Jordan. Did Billy and the Kids play the 11?
They did not play the 11.
Okay, well, I think J-Rad plays the 11 better than anybody other than the Grateful Dead. So for me, that's kind of a barometer. If you can play the 11 well, you're a good Dead cover band.
Yeah, I mean, I would say they're probably in the same tier. I'm a bit partial to the quintet with Jimmy Herring and Warren Haynes because I think they got weirder than anybody. But, like, it was definitely that... Maybe it was like one half, like a marginal difference slower than J-Rad, but I mean, it was the same thing. It's basically like that's, when I say it's the coolest Grateful Dead stuff I've seen in a long time, it's because it basically was like J-Rad, only someone from the actual Dead was in there. And like, I mean, I think Metzger's awesome. Manger's great. I mean, I think across the board, it was basically like that, only it was kind of, I mean, it had this specialness to it, right? Every time I see J-Rad, I think it's amazing, and the last time I saw them at Red Rocks was one of the most emotional performances, because it was after Neil Casal passed, and it was just like so heavy. It was like when I saw the Allman Brothers at Locken after Farmer passed, and you could tell like the people on stage were going through something as they were playing, and it made it beautiful and special. But like something like Billy and the Kids, like it has this like, is this gonna happen again feel to it. That band hasn't played together in years. Are they really gonna start just picking up Billy's strings and get to do this again? And Billy's voice like is just so choice on some of these things, and having Tommy and Billy going back and forth. I don't know. It's hard to say. I love J-Rad. That's really like one of my favorite things to do these days. But this was kind of that plus this like air of specialness and uniqueness.
No, I know what you're saying, Jordan. It was really an all-star band because, Billy Strings got his first Grammy before he was 25, and that James fella with the sax, he's from the Trey Anastasio band, and then forget the fella's name from the Disco Biscuits was on keyboards.
Yeah, Manger, and James was great. He sang a Dear Prudence.
Yep.
Nice.
That was really, really choice towards the end. That was great. I'm trying, like, my ability to remember the first night versus the second night is completely different. We were talking about taking kids to shows, and so I have like a really good clear memory of the first night.
Microdosing does that to you.
Yeah, and I have a clear memory of the second night after my kid left, right? But like there's this period where I was at the show with my kid, and I can kind of tell you what they played, and I can kind of tell you what it was like, but I was like fixated on, my child being safe in a crowd of 10,000 hippies as opposed to just focusing on the music. And so
that was my policy. That's why I left the kids at home for years. But I get it.
I have a lot, but he just at this point he's just like, no, Daddy, I'm a grown up. I'm going, and I want to go see Billy Strings. And I mean, I've done 7 Red Rocks shows. He's come to 2. I didn't take him to Panic because I felt like that wasn't necessary. But he's gonna go to these. He's got a few other ones, and he loves it. He's like a hero.
Your excuse is when it's raining. You can definitely be like, oh, I'm sorry, you don't want to come. It's pouring out. Don't come.
Oh my God, dude! The rain at Panic on Friday was like some of the stuff I've never. I mean, I was wetter than when I went swimming the next day in a pool. Like it was amazing, and the band was dry. Like talk about the new roof. The band. I went Friday, Sunday. Mason went all 4 nights. Talk about a fucking superhero, because they did that Mission Ballroom show. I know a few people that did that.
So by the way, when you say Mason, I assume you mean Tavert, right?
Yeah, my business partner Mason Tavert, who I go see a lot of shows with.
There's a reason for that, and that's because Mason's a fucking legend. No matter what he does, he does it hard and he does it well. So hats off to Mason Tavert, not just in what music he sees, but in everything else he's done for us. So shout out to Mason Tavert.
Yeah, I mean, that was the best part about you doing this stuff, is you go to these... one of the reasons I love working in the cannabis industry is, like, I go to these shows, and, like, there's Bob Ashido from Incredibles, and I get to give him a hug. And he was in the merch line. I think he got a poster, man. Those posters were hard to get, that show. And he was towards the front. But, we had all different kinds of people from our crew and people from other businesses in the cannabis industry, and it's just so cool to go out there and see all these people that I work with, and then see them at night at shows, and it just gives us like a new way to frame the bond of the people that we work together with. And that one was cool, man. It was super fun. Christian was there, Natasha, Brooke. We've had some folks. Sean Hauser was there. She's super awesome. So we're pretty lucky that we have such a great crew. Oh, and Mr. Jason. There's a deadhead that works at my kid's school, who was looking for an extra ticket, and we got him an extra ticket. And so my kid was like super pumped because we're always going to shows with dad's friends, and now all of a sudden it's like he was his friend. He was like leaning over and talking to him the whole time, and he was like super pumped that Mr. Jason was there. So it was a pretty heroic night.
Hey, Jordan, we could obviously go on with you all night, as we typically can with most of our guests once we start talking about this kind of stuff. But we do have to go. Quick question for you. Are you a Springsteen fan? You're a New Jersey guy.
Yeah. I mean, I like The Boss. It took a long time for me to come around.
There was no enthusiasm in that answer, Jordan.
I don't love The Boss. I mean, my mom loves The Boss big time. I like The Boss. I like a lot of Boss songs. Sometimes I think he's awesome. Sometimes I feel like he's a little more cheesy than my tastes tend. I feel like being a Jersey boy, I should have more enthusiasm for The Boss. But I think I like my music a little weirder, I think, the end of the day.
What about God Street Wine and Spin Doctors and Blues Traveler?
Oh man, I know about God. I saw God Street Wine at like 95 at Irving Plaza, one of the first concerts I ever went to. Strange Folk opened, old school Reed Janauer shit.
Best band from New Jersey that never made it that should have during that era.
God Street Wine was pretty sweet. Yeah, we had a great time. We were laughing about it because I saw one of my buddies at a wedding, and they like to laugh about how I forget everything, and that was the concert where I left the tickets in Jersey, and there were no tickets on your cell phone, so my mom had to call the box office and convince them that we weren't scamming them, and they let us in. I don't know why, I don't know how, whatever, fucking shit she said to him on the phone. They're like, you better not be lying. I was terrified. 15-year-old kid being like, please just don't be mad at me when I smoke a joint inside.
I might lie to you, but would my mom lie to you?
Yeah, exactly. My mom's not a liar. Did you call my mom a liar? So yeah, the old school Jersey stuff is great. There's a pretty good music scene there, but it certainly is no Denver and no Red Rocks. So yeah, thanks so much for having me on, guys. This has been so much fun. It was a great thing to pretend to be working during and hanging out. This was a blast.
That's how we feel every week.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you, Jordan Wellington, our guest today from Vicente Cedarburg. And Jordan, just really quick, if any of our listeners would like to get a hold of you for any reason or to ask questions or just to talk, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can email me, jordan@vsstrategies.com, jordan@vicentecedarburg.com. Listen to the Weed Wonks podcast. It's super fun and nerdy and dorky. Come out to Denver and go to Red Rocks because that's the Mecca.
Jordan, let's get together for Phil and Friends.
Yeah, we're going all nights. Robbie's coming the first 2
Excellent.
nights.
Yeah, I'll be at Dillon the Thursday night.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait. That one's going to be super cool. The venue's gorgeous. I can't wait.
Excellent.
Gentlemen.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. Jim, talk to you next week. Thank you so much. Rob, as always, great show. Thank you very much. Any last words? You always have last words.
I always have last words. First of all, thank you to Jordan Wellington. Thank you, first of all, Vicente Cedarburg, VS Strategies. If you guys aren't familiar out there in the audio world, please give them a look. They do terrific work. Definitely go see Rosenberg's Bagels in Denver, Colorado, and go see Josh Pollock, who also grows some good weed. And finally, I'm an advisory board member of Conscious Alliance, and for all of you out there that are not familiar with the work that Conscious Alliance does, through music, they feed lots and lots of people in the United States. So please take a look at their 7th annual Conscious Alliance All-Stars, which is a dinner that's happening in Cherry Creek on August the 22nd. So if you go to consciousalliance.org, I believe, you'll be able to find information about it. But it is an absolutely fantastic organization. I think Jim and Jordan are probably very familiar with, probably Larry's as well. But please do check out what they're putting on. Huge silent auction with lots of music memorabilia attached to it. Other than that, have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Wonderful. Okay, folks, thank you all. Thanks again to our producer, Dan Humiston. Thanks and have a great week. We'll talk to you next time, and enjoy your cannabis responsibly.